Okay, so here we are going to attempt to repair this snap connectors toy. It seems like after you play with them for a while, they have a tendency to break off on the end right here. And so the first step is to get this plastic piece separated. And we have found that this part here needs to be taken off of this. And they do come apart. We have successfully bit one in half now. And we're going to attempt next to the no-bake cookie using a knife. If you just get it right there.
That was crazy. That scared me.
And get it off. And with the repair we're doing, we're not going to use that piece any longer. What that does is it exposes, you can see where the wire has been soldered to the metal part right there. So then the next step is to carefully remove that plastic coating off that remaining wire. And that leaves an exposed copper wire strands. And you'll want to spin those to braid them together. And then set that aside for a second. The next thing you need to do is strip the end of this off. If you have wire strippers, that's the best way to do it. But you can do it with a knife if you're really careful. Don't cut too deep or you'll cut into your wire strands. But you just have to kind of peel it off. If you cut through a couple of the wire strands, it'll probably be okay, but if you cut too many of them, you're going to need to start over again. So you just have to cut the plastic and then pull that coating off. That'll leave you a bunch of these separated strands that you need to twist. The next step is to twist them together. Before you do that though, if you have any of these, you can pick these up online at Harbor Freight. They are wire insulators, that kind of a heat wrap shrink insulator. And so if you want to use one of these, it'll make it nice at the end. So if you do want to use one of those, put it on first. If you don't know what they are, we'll show you here in a minute. So if you thread that on, they're very inexpensive though. You can get this whole box for $3 or $4. They come in a bunch of variety sizes. Pretty inexpensive. So thread that on first because it has to be on the wire. And then twist your two strands here together. And thankfully, once you get that plastic off, it's just enough to get them twisted. Okay, so once you have that, this is the part here that you're going to solder. I guess you could just leave it at that if you don't want to solder it. It would be fairly fragile, but you could leave it at that. Soldering is not too difficult. You do need a soldering iron. That's right here. This is an electric one. This is Harbor Freight, probably $5 or $6. So get that heating up. You need your silver solder, which is $1 or $2 at Harbor Freight. So the idea of soldering is you're melting this silver onto this to glue it together, basically, to fuse it. If you just melt the silver and it pours on it, it won't work because this copper wire has to be hot as well in order for it to bind. Heat this up first, and once the copper wire is hot, you touch that silver solder to it. I can probably do it like this. You touch the silver solder to it and it will just melt in. So you got to get the wire hot first or it won't adhere. If it melts, it won't bind onto the copper unless the copper is hot. This is the part where if you have a better soldering iron, it really makes it easier. They make little butane ones that heat up very quickly. This takes a while to heat stuff up. So we'll see how well this goes. This isn't a very good soldering iron, but you can get it done if you are patient. So you can kind of test it and see. Soldering iron, just the wire. And once the wire is hot enough, it'll melt right into the wire. Sometimes I found you do have to kind of get the wire hot by scraping it across the iron, but try not to get it to melt at that point, just to warm it up. Put a little pressure, and as soon as it gets hot enough, it'll hit a melting point where it just melts right in. You do have to be a little bit careful, because if you get the wire too hot, it will melt the insulation around it. But with this cool of an iron, it's probably not a big risk.
Okay, no more road housing. Stop it, crazy. Stop it. Stop it. Ethan? Quiet, no.
Libby, you can't mark the victim. You instigator.
Alright. Ethan, show us a magic trick. And Wyatt, show us a magic trick.
Starting to melt. So, like this case, it kind of melted on, and now there's a clump there. It's technically fused. It's not the best solder. But now you can kind of, now that I pulled the rest of the wire away, you can kind of heat it up and play with it and kind of redistribute it out and around. Then what you want to do is lay that flat against itself, and this is where, if you don't remember to put this on first, it won't work. You slide this up over it, and this one is just big enough to slide back up over that plastic part right there. If you have a heat gun, a blow dryer probably isn't hot enough. You can use your soldering iron if you're careful. You kind of just get it hot.
But don't use the tip.
Yeah, even the side, you might burn through, but as it gets hot, it shrinks. And it kind of creates a...
Maybe do it again.
A heat gun is ideal.
That was a good trick, Wyatt. High five. Good job, Wyatt. Oh, I got, okay. The color is blue.
There you go.
On each side, and you put it in the box, you toast it, and you put it in his back.
So probably don't jerk on it, or it'll, I mean, just like it would on one of these, if the kids are pulling them apart with the wire, it'll break off just the same as it would there. But it'll at least extend the life again.